Hey guys, it's Matt. Welcome to the second episode of Midnight Reality. My graphic was pretty lame that I put together a few weeks ago. I asked you guys to help me out. Several of you have. We'll use Sarah's today, and we'll rotate some of the other graphics that I've received in over the next few weeks. And Paul, who does the Bathtub Rebel, Norm, the Bathtub Rebel cartoon, is doing one or sketching one up now as we speak. So thanks to everybody that helped me out. I'm looking at this. I don't think this is supposed to be me because I don't have hair, but I don't know. I like whoever this friendly character is, it works. A note about the format here before getting started, the format of Midnight Reality in general. No ridiculous Marco Rubio sponsorships, no bad jokes. I've been getting very hyper, a bit out of control. Too fast in my presentation, way too fast. Maybe it works for some of the ways we make fun of reality in some of the other videos this week, but this has to be a much more SCR-IOUS serious and calm presentation, and I'll try to stick to that as much as I'm able. The topic today is a big one. I have no idea how to summarize it for you before getting started. I just have to start talking about it and it will evolve, but I assure you it's a big topic. It might be a bit disturbing in the beginning. In the end, it's probably great news. Has to do with existence itself, life and death, what the dream character of our own self tells us about this life we're experiencing now to potentially the next level. Oh, okay, let me just get started, guys. And I need to bring back in Apple TV's Severance. If you haven't seen it, I will do 2 minutes or less. I am absolutely fascinated by this show for the reason we're about to talk about today. I've watched through season 1 of Apple TV's Severance again, and I'm just as fascinated by it. 2 minutes or less for anybody that hasn't seen it, because this is actually the premise that carries forth into our own situation with dreams, etc., and whatever else this conversation leads to. So, let's say you and I in Apple TV Severance, we are characters. We work in an office building. We agree to get a chip put in our brain. Let's just take it from the first person here, where we completely forget who we are at work. A chip is put in our brain as we walk through the doors into the office, into the cubicle. It goes blank. From your perspective and my perspective, it just goes blank. And the next thing we know, 1 millisecond later, we're walking out of the office because we wake up again per the chip when we leave. That creates a whole new entity inside the office. It's brilliant how they do this. And there's a reason why I'm so fascinated with it. I'm trying to relate the parallels to Apple TV Severance to the dream life, to our waking life, and the real world, because it's there. There's something there. I'm just fascinated by this TV show. It even relates to the concept of higher self. Videos I've made a few months back is higher self as friendly and kind as we think it is. So I'll try to work all of that in, but for now, let's just understand what happens in the TV show Severance. So you get the chip put in. Open the door, just goes blank, and then you're walking out at 5 o'clock. You don't remember one thing that happened at work. But the opposite happens to the entity that develops that the show calls innies and outies. The outie is the situation we just described. The innie is as soon as you step into work, per the brain chip, that person comes alive, wakes up. So that entity is walking into work, does its job at the cubicle, does its job at the computer, and then at 5 o'clock, as it steps out of the office into the parking lot, that entity or that part of you goes blank. So what's fascinating to start is a literal hell starts to develop for the innie personality versus the outie, the person that lives outside the office, that doesn't want to know what they do at work, doesn't want to be bothered by those stresses and worries. Two different personalities develop, and basically two different entities develop inside the same person. The scary thing, and why it's truly hell for the innie worker, is they never leave. They never leave. They wake up, or that entity wakes up as it steps into the office. Okay, it's 9 a.m. I do my job, I do my email, whatever it may be. I'm not allowed to leave that area, or the other person would wake back up. I'm there all day. 5 o'clock, okay, I step out. Okay, and you're like, well, what's the problem? The problem is, from that entity's perspective, when you step out at 5 o'clock at the end of the day, from that entity's perspective, a millisecond later, you're stepping right back in to work because you don't have any time recollection for your outer self. So you're never leaving. Never leaving. It's so, when it hit me, I went, oh man, when I fully grasped the concept. It's truly hell. The part of you that wakes up when you step into work knows nothing about, again, the outer part of you. Nothing. Doesn't know if the person at work, let's say, imagine yourself at work now on a computer. You know there's an outer part of me that exists when I step out, but that person's like, do I have a wife? Do I have kids? Where do I live? What's my address? Do I have a dog? They don't know their hobbies. They don't know their interests. Again, they do know a little bit about the world, or the TV show doesn't work. They know what a bridge is, they know what a park is, and a tree, and an airplane, but they don't know anything about current events. They don't know anything about themselves. And they never sleep. They never do anything in their entire existence but work. They don't sleep. And they, again, 5 o'clock, and they actually say goodbye to each other. See you, Fred. See you, Ted. I don't know why. They go through the motions because they step out, and then one fraction of a second, they step in. Now, it might have been, say, Thanksgiving. There could be Thursday off, Friday off, Saturday off, Sunday off for the office worker. But from the entity that works inside the office perspective, doesn't matter if there's 4 days off. Doesn't matter if they took a month off. They step out, and a second later, they're stepping back in. No sleep, no downtime, at work and awake for their entirety of their existence. And the way that this Apple TV Severance creates even more hell, it's not like the Google Office Park they show in The Interns with Vince Vaughn and things to do. And it's just this horribly sterile, everything's white. There's no windows, certainly because they can't see the outside world. They just sit in these little cubes doing these jobs where numbers float around. There's no pictures on the wall. It is truly hell. And Matt, you're going to try to relate this to our existence, the waking world, the dream world. I'm going to try to see if there's any correlation here. With the TV show Severance, at first, people, if you haven't seen it, you're like, well, what's the big deal? Okay, a part of you is at work, a part of you is at home. Each part doesn't remember the other. But what they do such a great job on is two completely different entities develop. And I start thinking about things like the corpus callosum and how artificial that is, that two sides of the brain only can connect or communicate with one little strip going across. I mean, we'll talk about that. But two completely different people, two completely different entities, where they actually start, in one case, to hate each other, to work against each other, to sabotage each other. Say, well, if I just slice whatever or cut myself or hurt myself before I step out, then the outie part of me is going to not be able to go out tonight. It's going to have to stay home with a bloody arm, or to sabotage each other. And they don't like, and the outie, the person that lives out, it knows it's like a different entity developed in work. And they're very, it's almost like I don't know what you want to call it, a racism or something. Like the outies, the innies, my innie self is just my worker. And some of them don't care about their innie self at work. It's just a worker. They know it's developing into its own entity, and the outer entity's like, well, they don't care. They just, as long as that person goes in or that entity develops on its own, it can develop different habits. It can like different types of ice cream. Hey, that person or that part of me just is here to work, and I don't give a shit about it as long as it continues to keep my job. It's very strange. So how can we relate that to this existence? I don't know. We'll try, or they'll put me into a white room. A few months ago, I remember talking about this same topic, of course, but then relating what we'll talk about now, but we're going to go in other places, relating the higher self relationship to you that you know as here, yourself here on earth, to the part of you that's not here. How similar is that to the innie and outie worker in the show Severance? But also, you can keep this relationship or this ratio between entities going. Your dream self to your, quote, real world self, it's kind of gets into like Inception, one layer down, another layer down. So can all of this and this topic, can it come together somehow? Well, I'm going to try, and we'll see. If not, it's White Room Central for me. All right, let's do the higher self relationship to you first. You've heard me talk about this guy, Tony, who I've had many email conversations, a phone conversation. He has communed in some way with his higher self. So most of the information about higher self, other than what resonates with me or my inner knowing tells me is true, etc., most of it has come from Tony, and most of what he's told me does resonate with me. At the most basic level, all higher self means, it's really not much different than the term spiritual. It just means a realization that a part of you is not here. That's all you need to know. There's more to it, but you don't need any more than that. It's a simple realization. that do you believe there's a part of you that's not here? So that's a simple belief set or classification, and there seems like there's only two more. There's somebody that still might be spiritual or religious, but believe that all of them is inside the body, or at least here, or 6 feet above you. Soul, spirit, it's all right here inside this earth system. A belief in higher self is more about, no, okay, there might be soul here, or there's something that animates the body. This is needed to make a body work, but there's a part of me, a connection to something that's not even in this earth system, not even in this whole universe. I mean, it seems so vast to science, and their experiments say the universe is endless, and if you were the day of your death, you back up out of here, you probably could hold the whole damn thing in your hand like a snow globe. That's why I keep calling it a snow globe. The more vast it appears to science, well, let's just take the universal rule of opposites. It's probably very, very small compared to all that is. The bigger it seems to science, well, I'll just take the opposite of what those dopes tell me. It's probably very small compared to the aspect of you that's not here. So there's 3 ways to look at this. Higher self to you. There's a part of me that's not here. Someone else might say, well, I'm spiritual and religious, but my soul, everything is with me here in the body or right with the body, 6 feet above or whatever. Then there's the atheist that really would never even stumble upon this video. The atheist position is cerebral sloth. They just think all this for nothing. Came out of an explosion in space. So how a bird flies, the beauty of a sunset, the beauty of certain flowers, your emotional relationship to your family, it all just came out of an explosion in space. Yeah, what'd you think? Hadn't you ever watched Nova, you son of a bitch? If they can't get beyond that, atheists, there ain't too many here, so we ain't going to spend much time on their position. Now, like we talked about a few months ago, if there's a tremendous parallel between Severance, the TV show, and you to your higher self, at first, it's not a very good situation. All right. Now, remember, that would be the innie, the person that works in the office, that goes in to do the job. That would be, if this parallel exists, you here on Earth, and your higher self would be the outie person, the aspect that doesn't go in and do the job. Going into the corporation in Apple TV Severance called Lumen was the same as being born and living a lifetime on Earth here. So the parallel that's the most negative, we'll start with the most negative and get more positive from here, hopefully, is your spiritual self, wherever it is, in all that ever was and all that ever will be. It's like, it's time, Matt, or I don't know what myself would be called, Nuwanda or something. It's time to go into that Earth system. I've got to go into the Earth system and learn lessons. I hate that place. Or it's your last time you got to go, but I found a way to kind of beat the system. Can I send an aspect of myself in there without me having to go in? Well, it's never been tried. We'll look at the contractual details. It looks like, in a roundabout way, the contract has a few loopholes, and you can do this. Again, this is the most negative, guys. Let's just play this out. All right, I'm going to send an aspect of myself, some son of a bitch, some little aspect of myself in there to do the work, and then see, we're gonna make these dummies believe that when they sleep, they need 8 hours of sleep. Like, that makes a lot of sense. Like Darwin would say, a being would develop over millions and billions of years that needs to lie dormant while it could be killed by predators. Per Darwin's theory, it would need 8 hours of sleep. If anything about Darwin was correct, at this point, after millions and millions of years, we would need 20 minutes of sleep, or we could sleep 5 seconds at a time. But no, we could just lay there for 8 hours while the wolves come. That makes sense, Darwin. What do you think about that, Darwin? It's like he's probably rolling around with Dante Alighieri. Sorry. So they say, I'm going to send this son of a bitch in, and when he's awake, I'll be down. He can do the job on Earth, and higher self's like, I'll be dormant. But then when that son of a bitch goes to sleep at night, I'll put some bullshit in his mind called dreams or whatever. Then higher self can wake back up and go to Risa and have fun around the universe again. Are we, in this sense, we're playing it all out, guys. In this sense, we would be being used, the aspect of us, and Tony stresses, you are your higher self, so it maybe is not as separate as what is presented in Severance, but in this case, are we being used by higher self in this regard? Of course, any sort of conversation about a relationship between the you that you know of as you here, there's this that relate to the two Utes. The you on Earth here to higher self, or again, I don't like that term either, to the aspect of you that's not here, how is it typically always discussed? Oh, loving, like your higher self says loves you so much, and it just, oh, it'll do anything for you, and it's rooting for you, and it's giving you everything you, and I hope it is like that. I'm not saying, Matt, you've picked on it so much, and you're making enemies with it. I joke around. Higher self, I'm just joking with you, buddy. Be nice, be kind. Okay, I'm just in this severance parallel. If the severance parallel, if there's anything to it, then it's not as loving, and it's just always there. It's like, send that aspect. I created this little aspect of myself called little son of a bitch. Send him into earth. That damn dolt. Send him to do the work. Well, he could be run over by a car. F it, I don't care. I'll get his spiritual sense back. Whatever happens, put him in a body and let him do his menial job so we can learn something. Then, per the loophole, then I, as higher self, I don't have to go and experience it, but I'm going to take and learn the lessons from that little son of a bitch that I put in there. Okay, this is the most negative, but potentially I have to keep this on the table. It doesn't really matter. Okay, but here's where it gets a little strange, related to, in a moment, our waking life to our dream selves, as like the same parallel we're talking about now, higher self to you, to the dream self. It's very similar to the movie Inception. As above, so below. It parallels as you go down layers. All right, let's do this relationship. You, here on Earth, the person I'm talking to now, to the little dream you, son of a bitch. The person that you are in a dream. And I'm not, forget, guys, a lucid dream and all that. Some of you can do that. The typical dream experience for most people, 99 point whatever percent of the time, is you're in the dream and you don't know you're back here in the United States and there's another part of you. And okay, obviously we know that. But there's a lot of us here that lucid dream and will say, I know exactly who I am when I dream. Forget all that, okay? That's an exception. That is not the typical case. So you're you in the dream, whatever weird thing is going on. Guess what? To that entity in the dream, you that I'm speaking to now, in that relationship or ratio, is higher self. What's the difference? If I could go into the dream like Inception and say, you're dreaming and your higher self, what's kind of creating you, is on a couch or in a bed somewhere, it would be the same thing as what we're talking about now, to the next level up after death. What's the difference? After death, after waking up. It seems to be a very similar relationship. You that I'm talking to now to one layer up, your higher self. You that I'm talking to now is higher self creating the dream self. And the dream self, if anybody could talk to it, is just as in the dark about the real you that is supposedly generating the dream self, laying on the couch, taking a nap, in bed. The dream self is just as blind to that aspect as we are blind to higher self. The ratio seems a little bit too conveniently perfect, if you ask me. Our group of researchers don't spend as much time on dreams as we should. What is that aspect of reality? The whole world doesn't give it the credibility it deserves, dreams. It's just maybe there's some scientific studies and some university grant studies, but most people on the street, it's just, oh yeah, I go to sleep and then I start dreaming and my mind, my brain just creates little scenarios and it's no big deal. And we're talking about a relationship between an aspect of you in the dream world to the real you, and using that parallel that we know here to say, well, why wouldn't the same parallel exist between you, one level up in the dream, to higher self? It tells you a lot about how reality works, but nobody really takes it that way. We've ignored it in our community. Most people are like, oh yeah, my brain just makes these stupid scenarios up so it repairs itself, and then we can go happy hour, it repairs itself. Like, that's all they know. It's not that simple. I've woken up from dreams where I said there's just no possible way I could have created that detail. I mean, open up an elevator and there's just cars and trucks. And I remember waking up very quickly, the buildings, every little detail carved. And I said, there's no way my consciousness could do that. Because do it right now. Matt, close your eyes and just open your eyes and create a whole new building. Do a stable diffusion yourself. Don't think of the Philadelphia City Hall or a building you know. Create a whole new building. I can't do it in every little detail, but in a dream, as you turn every corner, just your regular old mind can create every little detail. That doesn't make any sense because you can't do it now. So there's, dreams, we all should spend more time. What does that tell us about reality? Maybe there's a lot more places we can go, but for now, it's like all of reality could be a gigantic Mandelbrot set. And that are those things that as you just dive in, it's the same pattern. Then you dive into one of the little fingers and it's the same pattern. And you dive into one of the little fingers on that pattern and it just goes and it goes and it goes. And I think per scientific experiments or, running this through supercomputers, eventually it cannot go on infinitely. There is an end for some reason. Well, how could it go on for millions and millions of layers and then eventually end? I don't know, but at least what I've heard is these Mandelbrot sets eventually have to end. And is that reality? Well, okay, I understand my dream self to me. Well, why wouldn't I assume that I am that same level of dream self to something else? And that something else is higher self. Then once you get to higher self level, or why don't we assume that is a dream self to something else? And who knows how far it goes? All I'm saying is we need to use our own understanding of dreaming. Lie down on the couch, take a nap. What happens? All these, especially if we're very tired, the dream scenarios can start inside of 5 or 10 seconds, almost immediately if we're very, very tired. Where, you always look in a book or something, oh, the REM doesn't start to 20, 30, 40 minutes. Bullshit. If you're tired, REM dreaming sleep can start almost instantaneously. And it is an aspect of repair to a degree, but the dream world, it tells us something about reality that we've all ignored. And, we don't have many clues here. We come in here, Tommy, the dumb, deaf, what? Tommy, the pinball wizard, the deaf, dumb, and blind kid. We come in, we have the dreaming world. It's a gigantic tool, in my opinion, that we should be using. It's like, everybody bows down to David Lynch, right? Was it Twin Peaks? I don't understand that whole Twin Peaks thing. There's like a sliver of our community that he's so insightful and it just bows down to Twin Peaks. I don't get it, but it's that famous Monica Bellucci quote. One little quote, a guy's like a god. Like, we are the dreamer that dreams. We are like the dreamer that dreams, that lives inside the dream. But who is the dreamer? We're like the dreamer that dreams, that lives inside the dream. But who is the dreamer? That's no different than what we're talking about now. I hate to inform anybody in our community but if you are like a David Lynch type and you've gotten to that level of success and the Not Nilk has enabled you to present Dune and your Twin Peaks, you are a monster minion of this Not Nilk system. There's truth that comes out everywhere. There's gigantic truth that's come out of Alex Jones for 20 years. It doesn't mean that that person is ultimately working for us. If they're at that level of success, I assure you, they are a Not Nilk minion to the nth degree. That does not mean we can't get truth from their works. But there's people that, David Lynch, like he's on our side, or it's not as bad as people that believe that Elon Musk is on our side. But if you are at that level of success, and I'm sorry to say it so definitively, because do I really know? But no, I've been watching or looking at reality for 15 years. Never been to no Eyes Wide Shut party. Wouldn't go if I was invited. But you don't get to that level of fame and success unless you are doing exactly what the Not Nilk wants. I don't think there's any exception to that. Here's where it gets a little bit strange, or just say hard to accept if reality really works this way or life and death works this way. Let's go back to Severance for a second. Somebody or the entity inside of Lumen that all they know is work. Okay, remember, they don't sleep. They're always at work every single week, other than the millisecond where they step out and the millisecond coming back. They're always at work. 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, always at work. Calendar just goes by. They know nothing else but a little white room. That's the hell of it. Right? When they retire, or the Audi decides that they're not going to work anymore, they're retiring, or they're fired, then the way Severance presents it, that is the day of their death. It's very creepy how it's done, but it is appropriate. It's the day of their death. It's the death of the entity that has developed and grown far different than the person outside of work. So say that you're the person outside of work and you are, quote, severed. That's what they call it in the show. And you're 65 and like you don't want to have to drive 30 minutes to work, even though you don't remember going to work and you don't that person doesn't remember the stresses or whatever the toil was, you don't want to do it anymore. You don't need the money anymore. Whatever, you're going to retire. So the outie makes all the decisions. The person inside of work, called the innie, is a slave. It doesn't have any say. It cannot quit. I should have mentioned that 20 minutes ago. It cannot say, I don't like this job and I want out. There are many innies that say, I don't like this job and I want out. And there's like enforcers and security that block the doors. So you can't leave here unless your outer self. That is, I should have mentioned that, because that's part of the hell. They cannot quit. So the outer self says, I'm done with work. The innie self, then, they come to the inner self working at a cubicle and says, your outer self has decided that next Tuesday at this time is your last day. That is recognized as death, because it is death to the inner self that has developed a completely separate personality, a completely different entity. So again, when they step out of work, their existence is gone. But is it really gone? See, that's where we get into the relationship between the dream and us to higher self. The most important thing to all of us, it's just innate in us, is the ability to continue our existence. But the ability to continue our existence with our own sense of consciousness that we are wielding right now, that we're using right now. So it's just not comforting to the person at severance. We'll say, well, it's the same body. Your body will continue. Your outer self will continue. But that entity that is developed with that particular set of consciousness, their last day of work will be Tuesday. When they step out of work, that entity, whatever has developed, will never wake up again. What's the definition of death then? Is that the death of that entity, or is it just not the death? It's very interesting the way they do this, but what's disturbing is this relationship to our higher self, or let's just go back to the dream you, where you're on the couch taking an hour-long nap. What if I could, like Inception, the movie, get into the dream you? And again, 99 point whatever percent of the time, the dream you is not aware that there's another you dreaming or lying on the couch. And I could get in there like Leonardo DiCaprio in Inception and sit at the bar with you and talk to you and say, I'm so-and-so, a projection into your dream environment. I'm Matt, but I'm going to sit here at the bar with you and convince you that you're dreaming. And maybe that you'll come around and say, oh, wow, I didn't realize. Maybe I can become lucid. I didn't realize this was a dream. Okay, but here's the thing. Here's what's disturbing to a degree. I'm talking to you. You are a conscious entity inside the dream environment. We know no different when we're dreaming. Say 1 hour from now, the alarm clock's going to go off, and there's another aspect of you that's sleeping, taking a nap on a couch. When that happens, you're dead. You're dead. The person that's sitting with me here in the bar in this dream environment is dead. Now, when we wake up on the couch, our existence, or whatever consciousness existed in the dream environment, we don't think of that as death. We don't care one bit. It just all makes sense to the higher level up. But if the dreamer, or the dream character, would be aware that their existence is over in an hour, or when that alarm goes, and they could be convinced that there's somebody sleeping on a couch that's making all this work, would they see it as a death? And it's the same thing. Our death, what's the difference? The end of the dream, our biggest concern, or where this gets disturbing for some people, is that higher self is, if it is like the outie as presented in Severance, it's not carrying forth our same consciousness through. And the end, again, the existence that we need carried forth, which is innate in all of us, is the carrying forth of the same level of consciousness. Now, again, if you relate it back to the dream to you, it just all makes sense. It's just all natural. So what's the big deal? The real you at the higher level is still intact. So is this disturbing or not? In a way it is, but it's not. So look, this is not easy to talk about. I don't know. I'm not going to re-record, but I hope this is coming out right. Let's back up and look at the movie Inception. And if you haven't seen it, I'll describe what you need to know. 3 different layers, a dream within a dream within a dream. So there's that one scene, I guess they're trying to go down to the 3rd layer in the dream, where they're in the van. in the dream, in a van. They're going to try to go into a dream inside of a dream. So they're in the van, and however they do it, they hook up to their IV, and there's that chase scene. The van's trying to get away from whatever other van is shooting at them. And as you go down in dreams, the time gets more slow from the perspective of the higher reality up. So go down to the dream, it's 10 hours to 1 hour. Go down another layer, it's like 100 hours to every 1 hour. Now the point is, all this doesn't really matter. Think of Leonardo DiCaprio running around whatever level of the dream, running around in that hotel. That entity, essentially, when the other layer up wakes up, will die, is dead. Now, they don't seem to, of course, they don't make a big deal about it in the movie. They're just dreaming. It's no big deal. But it's done very differently than it's done in Severance, where we don't think about that aspect. The entity at Leonardo DiCaprio running around the hotel at that level, when the higher level wakes up, that entity, that consciousness, will die permanently. Now, in Severance, they make a big deal out of this. Your last day of work next Tuesday, the entity knows that when they step across that threshold, that level of consciousness is gone forever, and it is treated much more so like a death. Again, the dream environment to us, just if we lay down on the couch and take a nap and then we dream, that is such a gigantic reality giveaway that I've ignored, our community's ignored, everybody seems to ignore. We don't get many clues here coming in here as the pinball wizard. Tommy, the deaf, dumb, and blind kid sure plays a mean pin. We don't get much, but we have this thing called a dream, and we just write it off as this no big deal. I mean, it's probably screaming, that layer to you, your layer to the next layer. It does resonate with me. It makes sense. This isn't a very religious presentation. If you're a Muslim or a Christian listening, they're horse shit. I see it this way. And then there's probably many other layers, and it's natural, and it's not a big deal. It's not one thing in this environment or this reality we should worry about once we get a certain realization as to how things work. It's always simple. It's not complicated. This thing here with us, this knot milk, this energy vampire, it always wants us to make it complicated. It wants us to believe it's complicated. It's not. What does your inner knowing tell you? The inner knowing tells you the answers here are very simple. If we can just cut through all this noise. The No Consequences people, and Scott, the president of the No Consequences people, he's the president, the president of La Hermandad No Consequences people. He said, I knew you'd come around, Matt. Boy, you coming around, am I? Well, let's go back to Inception. I am, to a degree, coming around. Of course, in terms of that sliding scale, I've moved several rungs down towards the No Consequences people. I see an evil here. I see how hard it works to get something from us. When we give it what it wants, there's always a consequence by the definition of consequence. So I haven't gone all the way down the rung, but a little bit I have. But look, go back to Inception, the movie Inception. There was let's say, okay, yeah, they're just dreaming and they're layers down. But if something happened, and it's a movie, so they have to keep it relatively simple. So if I die at this level, or if something happens at the third level, a dream within a dream within a dream, my consciousness fragments into the abyss, or however they called it, similar to the Pope's abyss statement. So, I'm not, again, Matt, Inception, by the way, and Severance, Matt, is not telling you exactly how reality works. Yeah, I hear you. We take little bits and pieces, and we put the collective whole together. But even in Inception, it wasn't just like waking up. If certain things happened, and you go down that far, your consciousness could be fragmented, or you could cast yourself down into the abyss, and who knows how far down this layer is. Maybe this is like Inception. Like, you're going to go to that next layer called Earth? We're already pretty far down. Are you sure? Yeah, but the biggest gains come from the biggest risks. I'm going down to the next layer, Earth. You going down there? That's hardcore pipe hitting shit. See, I don't know. Risk reward, right? If there's a big reward, we get so much out of Earth. It's a school. We learn lessons. Well, I don't know. Yin and yang is the symbol here, right? So there's only reward with no risk. Yin and yang is the symbol here. I've come down the sliding scale, No Consequences people, but then that gigantic yin and yang pops up. It is the most important symbol of all time. And it says, ooh, if this happens, this has to counterbalance it exactly. Risk reward. What did the Merovingians say in The Matrix? Causality. The cause and effect. No consequences, people. A cause and no effect. All right, I've come down the scale a bit, but then they would scream right back at me. I can represent them as two entities at the same time because I can hear them screaming in my ear saying, "Matt, you're using the dream to your existence as your primary example in this whole video or presentation. The dream is there. Can you lose yourself spiritually in your dream, Matt? You're saying the ratio may be similar to you, to your higher self, or what exists after death. Can you, let's say you do some really bad things in your dream, Matt, and I'm sure you have, you sick son of a beach. Did you just lose yourself spiritually because of what happened in the dream, Matt? I hear you. I can represent both Britney Spears' personalities at the same time. One more thing about the movie Inception that I think is similar to us dreaming. They talk about the time dilation. I don't know exactly what terms they use, but say 1 hour in the real world, 1 hour in the real world. If you go down a layer into the dream, it's 10 hours to the top layer. So it's moving normally when you're in the dream, but it's like speeded up to the higher level. All you need to remember is the numbers get higher as you go down. 10 hours, one level down, the next, and then it's exponentially compounded, like 100 hours. Remember in the movie, Leonardo DiCaprio, something happened where he did get caught in this abyss layer, and he was down there for the equivalent, from his time, 50 years he spent in this layer of the dream. But back, quote, on Earth, or at the highest level, or the real world, it was, say, a few hours, or I don't know, maybe it was a few days. I forget what it was. So obviously it was a few days because Leonardo DiCaprio looked, he still was about 30 at the time of the movie, hadn't aged. It was 50 years. But this is similar to our experience. I can't tell, I think most people say it's 1-to-1, but I can't tell you how many times in the morning when I'm very tired, I know, let's say I have to get up at 6:30, but I just want to sleep for a half hour more, but the cats are, they want to get fed and I've got to get up and I'm dozing in and out. I can't tell you how many times this happened. I'll look at the clock, 6:30. All right. And then I'll just doze off. And it seems like I've been sleeping or dreaming for, I don't know, maybe like 4 or 5 minutes. And I'll look and it'll say 6:31. Like, what? 1 minute has gone by? And then will happen right after that. Same thing, 6:31, go back to sleep, start dreaming immediately because I dream heavily in the morning. My heavy sleep is more towards the morning than say 12 to 2. And then I'll wake up, I just had a 5 or 8 minute dream. It'll say 6:32. 2 minutes have gone by. So it is moving more slowly up top and more quickly as you go layers down. That's my experience, and it does relate to what Inception, the movie, presented. So the main thing here that's kind of disturbing is the number one thing we want to preserve per every instinct we have is, and even the way the afterlife is presented in a variety of different religions or myths or scenarios going back thousands of years, that it's you in the afterlife. Maybe you're in a different etheric body or spirit, but it is your consciousness. It's Harry Potter's, it's him sitting with Dumbledore, and Dumbledore sends him back. You got to go back, like the typical NDE story, but it's him. Where in Severance, it's, that consciousness is gone forever. And that is the most scariest thing to us, where if any of this is true, that we could die, and even the way Tony presents the higher selves having 50 or 100 different incarnations into these types of material plane reality systems all happening at the same time, maybe if he's listening to this, he could explain it, or his understanding of this in a little bit more detail. Okay, if I just blend back in to higher self, then, well, that's great. But okay, it's the consciousness that has evolved here that I know as me potentially is gone forever. And that is the most disturbing thing to all of us in the world, in the universe, holding on to our consciousness forever or not. I mean, this is what, everything cries out that but again, just if you think of the dream character, and if I could talk to the dream character at the bar, saying, whatever's creating this is, you're going to wake up in an hour, the alarm's going to go off, and what you know of here, this entity, the way this thing thinks here, is going to die. Because it wouldn't understand that its thought process is being driven by the thinker dreaming or sleeping on the couch, like that David Lynch quote. So yes, that thing here, or we here, will die, but the consciousness is come when you wake up in the morning. Okay, you don't care about the entity of you running around the dream, and you don't light a candle and it's dead, and then just go, oh, you cry and mourn over the entity that was you in the dream. We don't give a shit about it. It's just part of us. So as creepy as or as scary as this can get, it's at the end of the day, it's just natural. It's as natural to me as waking up in the morning. It just all makes sense. And yeah, it's more fodder for the no consequences people. It's not exactly, Tony might say the consciousness that you know here, but you wake up from the dream, it just makes sense. The big you, it's you, okay? And your higher self is you. And it's like, oh, then that earth experience is all in context. And there's no mourning that entity's dead. Like maybe that's what Severance is trying to do. Severance it's Ben Stiller directed and produced. You don't think there's going to be a bit of creepiness in that Zoolander creep? He's not looking out for us. He's worse than Elon Musk, Ben Stiller. So Matt, yeah, maybe we have to be careful that we then take that truth and manifest his idea of what he wants people to believe. Well, yeah, we're big enough to discuss all aspects here. Nobody here's stupid enough to be fooled by Ben Stiller. I mean, give me a break. So we're gonna analyze all aspects and then take parts we need. It's no big deal. Of course, there's deception in everything presented by the Not Nelk. I'm not going to bow down to what David Lynch says or anything on Apple TV, but there's truth in it, and we're getting very good at picking apart or taking the pieces we can use and leaving the dump and the crap behind for Ben Stiller, like the poop-filled bag on Halloween. So I'm glad to have gone through all that I just presented. I need to do that for myself. I get a lot by talking it out. I can do it much better here than just trying to think on my own in a chair. But I'm right back to where I started. When we die, or when I die, it'll be like waking up in the morning. It'll all just make sense. It'll all be very simple. I think the dream to our existence here tells us our existence here to the next. And if there are more layers after that, well, we'll never know. It'll just make Matt, that's no solution. That ain't no grand insight. It'll all just make sense. That's all we need to know. How is anybody going to know any more than that? There's a lot of Christians here. There really are. I don't know how they react to a presentation like this. We should start having more conversations with the Christians that are here because there's quite a few. Okay, what does Jesus do with me? Honestly, I mean, is Jesus going to cast me down into some sort of hell or limbo or suffering or because I have a belief set? I tried to live my life the best that I could. I see this is where I just don't understand. The all-powerful creator of everything wouldn't have an ego, wouldn't need worship. I don't understand this. I really don't. I mean, only something with an ego, with with feelings that could be hurt or would punish someone. I know if the Christians here, I can hear you. I mean, I don't think they're an evangelical group. Matt, don't assign me with evangelicals that say if you don't accept Jesus Christ, you're going right to hell for all of eternity. It's a different type of Christian that's here. You'd have to be, or you would have left me a long time ago. But still, the question remains: if Jesus is your way out, okay, and that is the solution for everyone. It might not always be one size fits all. I've been thinking about this a lot. We need to talk about this. Why is it one size fits all? Jesus might be your way out. Why does that have to be my way out? How do you know we're exactly the same type of thing or entity? Who knows? But okay, what does Jesus do with me? Okay, obviously I know what the evangelical church would say, down the road here. But what would you say? What is Jesus going to do with me? Well, Matt, you're in your early 50s. There's time for you to accept Jesus. I'm not going to accept Jesus as my Savior or my solution as I pass into the moment of death. That's not going to happen. So I'm asking you as an adult to an adult, and I appreciate the Christians that are still here because we still have this thing out here called Not Nilk. We have to deal with that. Okay, we're in the same foxhole regarding that and the energy it wants from us and the trick that it's designed to play on us. But what I'll ask you, and we need to have more of these conversations, the Christian or the type of Christian that's here, what does Jesus do with me? I don't, assume, of course, this assumes that there's only one way. It has to be Jesus and no other way. Okay, what is Matt? They're going to treat you just like the Muslim that's fooled into from a Christian perspective, believing in the wrong gods, or the Buddhist that's fooled into believing the wrong gods. I want to ask the Christians that are here, what does Jesus do with me and say our man B, who's a Muslim and other religions? Okay, what is Jesus going to do with all of us from your perspective? I've never been told that from other truthers that are Christians. I want to know what your perspective is on that. I really do. I hope you comment, and I'll look for those comments. Guys, one point of clarification or correction from a few videos back when I called the eye of, or the spot of Jupiter, the all-seeing eye. I'm well aware that Sirius is the brightest star in the sky, which dominates their astrology is Sirius and Jupiter based. That Sirius is the leading candidate, for the eye of providence and the all-seeing eye. It's so obvious. I mean, I didn't even mention it. How do you, I'm saying, I guess what I'm saying is it's both in some regard. So here is a Battlestar Galactica episode called The Eye of Jupiter. And it's the 11th episode of the 3rd season. Well, there's your 33. I'm just saying it's both in some way. Of course, without saying, Sirius is in that conversation, of course. I mean, right, Alan Parsons Project, Sirius, I am the eye in the sky, of course. But it's this too, or when they cover one eye and not the other, this is to do with all the eye presentations we see. It's also the eye of Jupiter. Okay, it's not just Sirius. I didn't even mention Sirius when I said this in passing a few videos back. I want to be very clear. I mean, even like in my own theory about, John McEnroe's ode to Sirius, when he says a linesman misses a call, you cannot be serious, screaming out, well, that's like an ode to their astrological god Sirius. But think of it, it's even more related because the linesman has missed the call. The linesman didn't have the eye to see the call, saying to the linesman with bad eye, you cannot be serious because you missed the call. I mean, of course, but the red spot of Jupiter, also called the eye of Jupiter, plays into it somehow too. Again, I'm almost ashamed of myself, and also in what I did with analyzing Osiris, the dick of the Oscar. It's all, why do we, it's okay, it's fun to do at times. We don't have to understand their symbolism. It's fun to do from time to time. But don't think for a second that we have to understand their symbolism. It's for them. It has nothing to do with us. It's for the creep class. The creeps need their symbolism and their numbers. We don't, as real spiritual beings. Just wanted to clarify that. Thanks, guys.